hope you enjoy the story. Let's begin. The envelope had no return address. Nolan Thorne stood in his home office, examining the plain white paper between his fingers. His posture remained rigid, a habit from years of watching his father stand at attention. The clock on his desk read 7:03 p.m. Early enough that Lacey wouldn't be home from her book club. For another 2 hours, he slid a letter opener across the seal with precision. The contents spilled onto his desk photographs, 5 of them, glossy and damning. Lacey, his wife of 12 years, wrapped around a man Nolan recognized as Marcus Hale, a divorce attorney known for his aggressive tactics. The timestamp placed them at the Ridgewell Heights Hotel 3 days ago, during what Lacey had called lunch with Corinne. Nolan's face betrayed nothing. Only a slight tightening around his mouth, a tell, so minute no one but his father would have noticed. Predictable, he muttered, the word falling into the silence of his meticulously organized office. 15 minutes later, he had ordered 6 hidden cameras from his own security company, set for priority delivery tomorrow. 2 hours after that, he methodically combed through their joint accounts, downloaded their phone records, and created a secure cloud folder labeled contingency. When the front door opened at 9:42 p.m., Nolan was seated in the living room, reading a technical journal, his face composed. "Hey, babe," Lacey called, her voice carrying a forced lightness. Book club ran late. Nolan looked up, studying his wife. Her black dress hugged curves he once thought were only for him. Her smile didn't reach her eyes, which darted around, taking inventory of the room. "How was it?" he asked, tone even measured. "Oh, just another depressing novel about marriage falling apart." She laughed nervously. "I'm going to shower." Nolan nodded, eyes returning to his journal. "Nora's asleep. She waited up for you." A flash of guilt crossed Lacey's face, real emotion, finally before she turned toward the stairs. "Lacey," he called after her, voice neutral. She froze, turning slowly. "Yes. Is everything all right?" He looked directly into her eyes, his gaze penetrating. She hesitated, then smiled too brightly. "Of course. Just tired." She disappeared up the stairs. 3 days later, the cameras were installed. Nolan watched the footage each night after Lacey fell asleep. He documented everything. The calls she took in hushed tones, the 2-hour grocery trips that yielded only a single bag, the text messages she deleted immediately after reading. Patterns emerged. Tuesdays and Thursdays, she claimed lunch with Corinne, but was gone for 3 hours. Wednesday evenings were book club nights. Sundays, she insisted on separate activities, her at the spa, him with Nora. He didn't confront her. Instead, he built his case, piece by piece, with the same methodical precision he used to build his security empire. On day 12, Lacey's behavior shifted. She became careless, left lipstick-stained receipts from hotels in her purse, came home with her blouse buttoned wrong, used perfume Nolan had never bought her. Perhaps she wanted to be caught. Perhaps she no longer cared enough to hide it. Either way, Nolan continued his silent documentation, his face revealing nothing while his mind calculated every possible outcome of the war she didn't yet know was coming. The Carsons' annual neighborhood barbecue attracted Ridgewell's elite. White tents dotted their sprawling backyard. Catering staff in crisp uniforms weaved through clusters of people, and champagne flowed freely. Nolan stood at the edge of the gathering, a glass of sparkling water in hand, watching Lacey hold court with the wives of his business associates. She laughed too loudly at something Corinne Wolfe whispered in her ear. "God, I forgot how fake these things are," a familiar voice drawled behind him. Nolan turned to face his older brother. Jace. Jace Thorne looked both exactly the same and completely different. The same sharp jawline they both inherited from their father, the same dark eyes. But his skin was weathered from outdoor work, his hands calloused. His suit was off the rack, not tailored like Nolan's. "Little brother." Jace nodded. "Nice party." "Very." "Ridgewell, what are you doing here?" Nolan asked, voice carefully neutral. "Mrs. Carson invited me. Apparently, she remembers me from high school. Said I should reconnect with the community." Jace's lips quirked. "Don't worry. I won't embarrass you in front of your rich friends. It's been 7 years." "Yep." Jace took a swig of beer. Dad's funeral. Good times. Across the lawn, Lacey noticed them. Her smile faltered before brightening to something almost manic. She excused herself and made her way over, Corinne trailing behind. Jace. Lacey's voice rose with artificial delight. What a surprise. Jace gave her a tight smile. Lacey, you look expensive. She laughed as if he'd paid her a compliment. And you look exactly the same. Her eyes flicked to his off-the-rack suit. Still welding, Jace confirmed. Still getting my hands dirty. How quaint, Corinne murmured, just loud enough to be heard. Nolan watched the exchange silently, noting how Lacey shifted slightly away from him, how her hand didn't reach for his as it would have in the past. I hear congratulations are in order, Jace said suddenly, eyes fixed on Lacey. 10 years of marriage next month, right? Lacey's smile tightened. 12, actually. My mistake. Jace's eyes met Nolan's for a brief moment. Time flies. Lacey, we should check on Melissa, Corinne interjected. She was asking about your interior decorator. Of course. Lacey touched Nolan's arm, the gesture mechanical. Don't let Jace keep you all to yourself, honey. Mingle. She pressed a quick kiss to his cheek that didn't touch skin before walking away with Corinne. As they moved out of earshot, Nolan heard Corinne's hushed voice. Can you believe he showed up? And in that suit. Lacey's laugh floated back to them. Nolan always felt guilty about him. The less successful brother and all that. Jace's jaw tightened. Still a piece of work, isn't she? Why are you really here, Jace? Nolan asked, ignoring the comment. Jace leaned closer. We need to talk. Not here. Tomorrow noon at Pike's Diner downtown. He straightened. And Nolan? You might want to check who your wife's been meeting at the Ridgewell Heights Hotel. Room 412. Before Nolan could respond, Jace was walking away, nodding politely to confused guests who couldn't quite place how they knew him. Nolan remained still, processing. Room 412. The same room number that had appeared on the receipt he'd found in Lacey's purse 3 days ago. His eyes found Lacey across the lawn. She was laughing again, head thrown back, hand resting on Samantha's arm. As if sensing his gaze, she looked up, meeting his eyes across the distance. Her smile never faltered, but for a moment, something cold and calculating flashed in her eyes. Nolan lifted his glass in a mock toast. Let her think he suspected nothing. The barbecue would end, they would go home together, and he would continue building his case. But now, it seemed, he had an unexpected ally. The rain had started just as Nolan pulled into the parking lot of Pike's Diner, a steady downpour that sent other patrons hurrying inside. He sat in his car, watching the windshield blur, remembering another rainy day 7 years ago. Their father's funeral had been small, attended only by a handful of former military colleagues and business associates. No friends Thomas Thorne hadn't believed in friendship. No extended family he'd cut ties with them decades ago. Just Nolan and Jace standing side by side, watching a casket lower in his soggy ground. Nolan! He blinked, coming back to the present. Jace stood beside his car, tapping on the window, already drenched despite the short walk from his truck. Inside, they took a booth at the back. The waitress brought coffee without being asked. You look like him, Jace finally said. More than ever. Nolan's mouth tightened. Why are you here? Not even going to pretend to catch up? Ask about my life? Jace shook his head. Some things never change. Why are you here? Nolan repeated. Jace leaned forward. I know about Lacey. What about her? She's cheating on you. With that shark divorce attorney, Marcus Hale. Jace watched Nolan's face carefully. But you already knew that, didn't you? Nolan said nothing, which was answer enough. What you might not know, Jace continued, is that she's been planning this for months. Setting you up. For what? A divorce that'll bleed you dry. Jace pulled out his phone. I have a friend who works maintenance at Hale's firm. He overheard them talking, recorded some of it. Nolan took the phone, pressed play. Lacey's voice filled his ears. Need more than just the affair angle. He's too controlled, Marcus. He won't react the way most men would. That's why we document everything. Marcus's smooth voice replied. Every argument, every cold shoulder, every late night at work. Twist it all. Make him the villain. And the company, with the right judge, right timing, and your performance half. Maybe more. Nolan handed the phone back, face impassive. Why are you showing me this? Because regardless of what happened between us, you're my brother. Jace paused. And because I was wrong. About the will, about Dad, about what happened. Explain. After the funeral, I found some of Dad's old papers. Letters. Things he'd written about both of us. Jace stared into his coffee. He manipulated us against each other our whole lives. Made me think you were his favorite. Made you think I was weak. Classic divide and conquer. And you're just realizing this now? 7 years later, I'm stubborn. Another family trait. Jace looked up. When I heard what Lacey was planning, I couldn't let it happen. What exactly did you hear? They're going for everything house, custody of Nora, half your company. She's going to claim emotional abuse, isolation, control. Say you're just like Dad. Nolan's jaw tightened, the only visible reaction to words that cut deep. She's already moved money, Jace continued, to an account in her sister's name in Seattle. Over $300,000 so far. This was new information. Nolan had monitored their joint accounts, but hadn't thought to check Lacey's sister. I'll need proof. Jace nodded. Already made copies. They're in my truck. Nolan took another sip of coffee, mind rapidly recalculating. And what do you want in return? A flash of hurt crossed Jace's face before hardening. Nothing. Believe it or not, this isn't a transaction. Everything's a transaction, Jace. Dad taught us that if nothing else. Maybe for you. Jace stood, throwing money on the table. The files are in an envelope under the passenger seat of my truck. It's unlocked. Take them or don't, that's your choice. He turned to leave, then paused. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. About the things I said at the funeral. About disappearing. Nolan said nothing, just watched as his brother walked out into the rain. 10 minutes later, he retrieved the envelope from Jace's truck. Inside were printed emails, bank statements, and a USB drive. On top was a note in Jace's handwriting. She's planning to file next week. Be ready. Nolan drove home, the envelope on the seat beside him, rain pounding against the windshield. The memory of another confrontation with Jace surfaced unbidden. You manipulated him. Jace had shouted over their father's fresh grave. Made him change the will. You always were his favorite. Is that what you think? Nolan had replied, voice cold, that I wanted his money, his house, the company he built through fear and control. You took it all anyway, didn't you? Because it was my right. I earned it. Where were you when he was dying? When the company was failing? Out living your life free from him while I stayed and fixed his messes. You became him, Nolan. That's why he gave you everything. He saw himself in you. Those words had cut deeper than any others. Because Nolan had feared they were true. Now, pulling into his driveway, he pushed the memory away. Whether Jace was sincere or had his own angle, the information was valuable. Another piece in the puzzle Nolan was methodically assembling. Inside the house, Lacey was in the kitchen, chopping vegetables with sharp, aggressive motions. She looked up when he entered, her smile not reaching her eyes. You're home early, she said. Meeting ended sooner than expected. Nolan set his briefcase down, the envelope safely hidden inside. Where's Nora? At Emma's house for a playdate. I'm picking her up at 5. Lacey set down the knife. I ran into Jace at the grocery store. Nolan kept his face neutral. Did you? He mentioned you two had coffee. She studied him. Reconnecting with your estranged brother? That's not like you. People change. Do they? She turned back to her chopping. He never liked me, you know. Jace doesn't like most people. He told me once that I reminded him of your father. The knife came down with extra force. Was that supposed to be a compliment? Nolan watched her hands, noting the slight tremor. My father was many things. Charming when he needed to be. Manipulative always. Lacey's chopping paused for a fraction of a second before resuming. Sounds like Jace was trying to insult me, then. Probably. Nolan moved toward his office. I have work to do before dinner. Actually, Lacey's voice stopped him. I wanted to talk to you about something. About us. Nolan turned, face expressionless. What about us? Her eyes searched his, looking for a crack in his armor. Are you happy, Nolan? With our marriage? With me? A test. Looking for material she could use later. Happiness is a state of mind, not a permanent condition, he replied. Are you unhappy? She sighed. setting down the knife. Sometimes I feel like we're just going through motions, like we're business partners raising a child. Is that how you felt last week at the Ridgewell Heights Hotel? Going through motions? The color drained from her face. What? Room 412. Nolan's voice remained even. You dropped the receipt in the bathroom trash. Careless. Her shock quickly morphed into defensive anger. You went through my trash? You're spying on me. I was emptying the bathroom trash and saw it. A calculated lie. Who were you meeting, Lacey? Corinne, she said quickly. We got a room to use the spa services. The Ridgewell Heights doesn't have a spa. She faltered, then rallied. Fine. We were meeting another friend. She's going through a divorce and needed privacy to discuss it. This friend have a name? It's not important. Lacey pushed past him. What's important is that you clearly don't trust me, which says more about you than me. Nolan let her go, watching as she grabbed her purse and keys. Where are you going? It's not time to get Nora yet. Out. She yanked open the door. Don't wait up. The door slammed behind her. Nolan stood still, listening to her car start and peel out of the driveway. Phase 1 complete. She knew he suspected, but not how much he knew. Now she would get sloppy, make desperate moves to accelerate her plan, and he would be ready. The papers arrived with clinical efficiency delivered by a process server who caught Nolan in the driveway as he was leaving for work. Nolan Thorne? You've been served. Nolan took the envelope without changing expression, thanked the server, and continued to his car as if he'd just received a mail-order catalog. Inside the car, he opened the envelope and read. Petition for divorce. Grounds: emotional abuse, isolation, controlling behavior, suspected infidelity. Demands: the house, full custody of Nora, spousal support, and 50% of all assets, including his company. Everything Jace had warned him about. Attached was an affidavit from Corinne Wolfe, detailing observed patterns of controlling behavior and emotional manipulation. A statement from a therapist Lacey had apparently been seeing in secret, documenting her symptoms of emotional trauma consistent with psychological abuse. All fabricated, all carefully crafted. Nolan placed the papers in his briefcase and drove to work, where Avery Duvall was waiting at her desk, efficiency personified in a tailored suit. Morning, Mr. Thorne, she said, handing him his schedule and coffee. You have the investor meeting at 10 and... She paused, studying his face. Is everything all right? Cancel my meetings today, Avery, and give me Roger Daniels on the phone. Your attorney. Avery's eyebrows rose slightly. Yes. Tell him it's urgent. Nolan moved toward his office, then stopped. And Avery? I need you to pull everything we have on Marcus Hale. Legal records, case history, personal information. Understanding dawned in her eyes. Of course, Mr. Thorne. Right away. An hour later, Avery entered his office with a stack of files and a determined expression. Marcus Hale, she announced, placing the files on his desk. Divorced 3 times himself. Known for aggressive tactics and borderline ethics violations. Specializes in high-asset divorces, usually representing women. She hesitated. If you don't mind me asking, Lacey filed for divorce this morning, Nolan said, voice matter of fact. Hale is her attorney. Avery's face hardened. I see. I've also pulled your financial records for the past 3 years. All accounts, investments, property holdings. Nolan looked up. I didn't ask for those. You didn't have to. Her voice was cool, professional. I anticipated they would be necessary. I also took the liberty of backing up all company files that relate to proprietary technology. Just in case. Nolan studied her for a moment. You knew this was coming. I suspected. Mrs. Thorne has been calling the office with unusual questions about company financials. Avery hesitated. I started documenting the calls. Dates, times, specific questions. The records are in that blue folder. Nolan opened it, found meticulous notes in Avery's precise handwriting. Dates that aligned perfectly with his own timeline of Lacey's behavior changes. His phone buzzed with a text from Jace. Have you seen the blog post yet? Nolan frowned. Pull up the Ridgewell Community Forum, he instructed Avery. She retrieved her tablet, opened the local news blog, and handed it to him. The headline read, Tech CEO Nolan Thorne accused of abuse in shock divorce filing. The article quoted sources close to the family, describing Nolan as controlling and emotionally abusive, with hints about financial improprieties being investigated. No direct quotes from Lacey, but Hale was mentioned as her attorney. Nolan set the tablet down. Get Roger on the phone now and contact our PR team. As Avery left, Nolan's phone rang. His daughter's school. Mr. Thorne, I'm calling because there's been an incident with Nora. Your wife attempted to remove her from school without following proper procedures. When we explained we needed your authorization, she became upset. Is Nora still at school? Yes, she's in my office. Your wife left about 10 minutes ago. I'll be there in 20 minutes. When he arrived at Ridgewell Academy, Nora sat in the principal's office, small and confused in her neatly pressed uniform. At 10, she had Nolan's serious eyes and Lacey's delicate features. Daddy, she looked up as he entered. Mom was acting weird. She said we were going on a trip, but wouldn't say where. And she got mad at Mrs. Phillips. Nolan knelt beside her chair. Everything's fine. You're going to come back to the office with me for the rest of the day. Is Mom okay? She's just having a difficult day. Nolan signed the release forms, thanked the principal, and led Nora to his car. Dad, Nora asked as they drove, are you and Mom getting divorced? Emma's parents got divorced last year. She had to move to a new house. Nolan's hands tightened on the steering wheel. Why do you ask? Mom was packing stuff last night. She told me we might be staying with Aunt Claire for a while. Nora looked out the window, and she was crying. Your mother and I are having some disagreements, Nolan said carefully. But you don't need to worry about it. You're not moving anywhere. Back at his office, he set Nora up in the conference room with her schoolwork and a tablet for when she finished. Avery brought her lunch and stayed with her while Nolan took calls from his attorney and PR team. By late afternoon, a brief statement had been released. Roger had filed a counter-petition and emergency motion to prevent Lacey from removing Nora from school without court approval. When Nolan's phone rang again, it was Jace. I just saw the blog post, Nolan said by way of greeting. That's why I'm calling. It's worse than that. They're claiming I filed a restraining order against you years ago. That you threatened me after the funeral. What? It's bullshit, obviously. Forged documents. But it's out there now. Jace's voice was tight with anger. How's Nora handling all this? She knows something's wrong, but not details. Nolan watched through the glass as his daughter bent over her math homework. Lacey tried to take her from school today. A sharp intake of breath. To where? Her sister's, perhaps. Seattle. You need to get emergency custody. Today. Already in motion. Nolan paused. I'll need you to make a statement. About the fake restraining order. Whatever you need. Jace hesitated. Nolan, when this goes to court, it's going to get ugly. They'll try to make you lose your cool. Make you look like Dad. I know. Just remember who you're fighting for. Nora deserves better than what I bet Lacey's planning. After hanging up, Nolan stood at the window of his office, looking out at Ridgewell. Somewhere out there, Lacey was with Marcus Hale, plotting their next move. They'd fired the opening salvo, expecting him to crumble or lash out in ways that would prove their narrative. They didn't understand who they were dealing with. Nolan Thorne didn't get angry. He got even. With precision, patience, and ruthless efficiency, the war had begun. Courtroom 3 of the Ridgewell County Courthouse had the sterile atmosphere that comes from too many lives being dismantled within its walls. Nolan sat at the defendant's table, posture perfect, face composed. Roger Daniels, his attorney, arranged papers with practiced efficiency beside him. Across the aisle, Lacey dabbed at dry eyes with a tissue. She dressed the part, perfectly modest navy dress, minimal jewelry, hair pulled back in a simple style. The vision of a woman trying to escape a controlling husband. Marcus Hale leaned toward her, whispering something that made her nod. Judge Eleanor Pike entered, her robe flowing behind her. At 60-something, she had a reputation for being tough but fair. More importantly, she was known for seeing through theatrics. This is a preliminary hearing in the matter of Thorne versus Thorne, she announced. I see we have counsel for both parties present. Let's begin with the plaintiff's motion for temporary orders. Marcus Hale rose, buttoning his expensive suit jacket. Your Honor, my client is seeking temporary exclusive use of the marital home temporary full custody of the minor child, and temporary spousal support in the amount of $15,000 monthly. On what grounds? Judge Pike asked. Mrs. Thorne fears for her safety and that of her daughter. Hale's voice took on a grave tone. Mr. Thorne has exhibited controlling and emotionally abusive behavior throughout the marriage, which has escalated since the separation. Do you have evidence of this alleged behavior, Mr. Hale? Yes, Your Honor. Hale approached the bench with a folder. We have affidavits from friends of Mrs. Thorne describing witness controlling behavior, therapy records, and most disturbing, a restraining order filed by the defendant's own brother, Jace Thorne, 7 years ago after Mr. Thorne allegedly threatened him. A murmur ran through the courtroom. Roger Daniels frowned, leaning toward Nolan. A restraining order? You never mentioned that. Because it doesn't exist, Nolan replied calmly. It's fabricated. Judge Pike reviewed the documents, her expression unchanged. Mr. Daniels, your response to these allegations? Roger stood. Your Honor, we categorically deny these allegations. Mr. Thorne has been a devoted husband and father. As for this alleged restraining order, it's the first we're hearing of it, and we would request time to investigate its authenticity. Your Honor, a voice rang out from the gallery. If I may. All heads turned. Jace Thorne stood in the back of the courtroom, dressed in clean but simple clothes. And you are? Judge Pike asked. Jace Thorne, Your Honor, the defendant's brother, the one who supposedly filed that restraining order. Marcus Hale's face darkened. Your Honor, this is highly irregular. I'm inclined to hear what Mr. Thorne has to say. Judge Pike interrupted. Jace walked down the center aisle. Your Honor, I'd like to state for the record that I never filed a restraining order against my brother. Never had reason to. That document is a forgery. You're willing to testify to that under oath? Judge Pike asked. Absolutely. Jace's voice was firm. That document is fake. Lacey leaned over to Marcus, whispering frantically. The attorney's face remained composed, but a muscle twitched in his jaw. Mr. Hale, Judge Pike said, did you verify the authenticity of this restraining order before submitting it to my court? Your Honor, we received it from a reliable source who... That's not what I asked. Did you personally verify its authenticity? No, Your Honor, but... Then I'm striking it from the record pending verification. Judge Pike turned to Jace. Thank you, Mr. Thorne. You may step back. As Jace returned to his seat, Roger Daniels rose again. Your Honor, in light of this attempt to submit false evidence, we would like to enter our own evidence regarding Mrs. Thorne's behavior. Proceed. Mr. Thorne has evidence that Mrs. Thorne has been having an affair with opposing counsel, Mr. Hale. Another murmur, louder this time. Lacey's face paled. Marcus Hale stood abruptly. Your Honor, this is an outrageous accusation. Do you have evidence, Mr. Daniels? Judge Pike asked, ignoring Hale. Yes, Your Honor. Roger approached with his own folder. Surveillance footage from the Ridgewell Heights Hotel showing Mrs. Thorne and Mr. Hale entering room 412 together on multiple occasions. Phone records showing calls between them dating back 6 months, well before any divorce proceedings were initiated. Judge Pike reviewed the evidence, then looked at Marcus Hale. Mr. Hale, if these allegations are true, you have a serious conflict of interest in this case. Your Honor, I can explain. Save it. We'll address your ethical situation separately. She turned to Lacey. Mrs. Thorne, you'll need new counsel for our next hearing. Are there any other bombshells either side would like to drop today? Roger Daniels stepped forward again. Just one, Your Honor. We have evidence that Mrs. Thorne attempted to remove the couple's daughter from school without authorization the day after filing for divorce, possibly with the intent to take her out of the court's jurisdiction. He submitted the school's incident report. Judge Pike read it, her expression hardening. In light of this evidence, I'm issuing a temporary order preventing either parent from removing the child from Ridgewell County without court approval. She looked at Lacey. Mrs. Thorne, this behavior raises serious concerns about your judgment. Given the conflicting accusations and evidence presented today, I'm ordering a full custody evaluation before making any permanent decisions. Until then, the child will remain primarily with Mr. Thorne. with Mrs. Thorne having supervised visitation 3 times per week. Your Honor, Lacey protested. My decision stands. We're adjourned until next week, by which time Mrs. Thorne should have new counsel. Judge Pike stood. And let me make one thing clear to both parties. I do not appreciate theatrics or attempts to manipulate this court. The next person who tries it will find themselves in contempt. As everyone rose for the judge's exit, Nolan caught Lacey's eye across the courtroom. Her face was a mask of fury and disbelief. She hadn't expected him to be prepared, hadn't expected Jace to appear, hadn't expected her carefully constructed narrative to crumble so quickly. Outside the courthouse, Jace fell in a step beside Nolan. That went better than expected, Jace said quietly. It's just the beginning, Nolan replied. She'll find new counsel. Regroup. Come harder next time. But now the judge has seen her true colors. That counts for something. Nolan stopped at his car. Thank you for coming today. Jace shrugged. Couldn't let them get away with forging my name. Besides, Nora deserves better than to be a pawn in Lacey's game. Across the lot, Lacey stood with Marcus, both looking daggers at the brothers. Marcus said something to her, then stalked to his own car, leaving her alone. She's going to be out for blood now, Jace observed. Good, Nolan said, opening his car door. Anger makes people sloppy. 3 days after the preliminary hearing, Nolan sat in Roger Daniels' office, watching his attorney review the latest material they'd compiled. These surveillance tapes are damning, Roger said, closing the folder. Not just the hotel meetings, but the conversations you recorded in your home. Is it enough? Nolan asked. It's a strong start. Proves the affair. Proves she was planning this for months. Roger leaned back in his chair. But Lacey's new attorney will argue the home recordings were made without her knowledge or consent. Oregon is a one-party consent state. I was present for those conversations. True, but judges can be squeamish about domestic surveillance. Roger tapped his fingers on the desk. What about these emails between Lacey and Corinne? How did you obtain those? They used the home computer. I installed recovery software before I moved out. Roger nodded approvingly. Those are perfectly admissible, and they clearly show the two of them discussing how to manipulate the narrative. Nolan's phone buzzed with a text from Avery. Updates on the Marcus Hale situation. Call when you can. Back at his office, Avery was waiting with a thick folder and a determined expression. What did you find? Nolan asked, closing his office door. Marcus Hale worked at Brennan Law Group 7 years ago, Avery began. I worked there too, as a paralegal. Nolan's eyebrows rose slightly, the closest he came to showing surprise. You never mentioned that. It wasn't relevant until now. Avery set the folder on his desk. He was assigned a high-profile divorce case tech executive, wife seeking half his company. Sound familiar? Go on. Hale pressured me to alter financial documents from Discovery. Avery's voice hardened. He wanted to hide assets, make it look like the husband was worth more than he claimed, so his client could get a bigger settlement. Did you do it? No, I refused. He threatened my job, but I still refused. I quit the next day. She tapped the folder. But I kept copies of the original documents and his alter versions. I also kept the emails where he pressured me. Nolan stared at her. Why? Insurance. Avery met his gaze evenly. I knew someday he'd go too far, and you chose to work for me later, knowing my wife was friends with Corinne Wolfe, who runs in the same circles as Hale. I needed a job, Mr. Thorne. Your company was hiring. The connection didn't seem significant at the time. She hesitated. But when I met Mrs. Thorne at the company holiday party 2 years ago, I recognized something in her. The same calculating look Hale's clients often had. Nolan opened the folder, scanning the documents inside emails dated 7 years ago, financial statements with clear alterations, Avery's resignation letter citing ethical concerns. Would you be willing to testify to this in court? He asked. Yes. No hesitation. I've been waiting for the right moment to bring this up. When I heard Hale was representing Mrs. Thorne, I knew it was time. Nolan closed the folder. Why, Avery? This could have professional repercussions for you. Something flickered in her eyes, determination, perhaps, or old anger. Because what he did was wrong. What he's trying to do now is wrong. She straightened. And because you've been a fair employer, you deserve better than this. Nolan nodded once. Thank you. That evening, as Nolan helped Nora with her science project at the kitchen table of their temporary apartment, his phone rang. Jace, have you seen it? His brother asked without preamble. Seen what? Check your email. Now. Nolan opened his laptop, found an email from Jace with a link to the Ridgewell Community Forum. A new post with the headline, Thorne divorce takes explosive turn. Attorney accused of ethical violations. The article detailed Marcus Hale's removal from the case, the allegations of his affair with Lacey, and reports from multiple sources about past ethical violations, including pressuring staff to falsify documents. How did this get out? Nolan asked quietly, moving away from Nora. I don't know, but it's everywhere. Local TVs picked it up too. Jace paused. How's Lacey taking it? I wouldn't know. Well, brace yourself. This kind of public humiliation, she's going to hit back hard. As if on cue, Nolan's phone buzzed with a text from Roger. Emergency. Lacey's filed for an emergency protective order. Claims you threatened her during yesterday's custody exchange. Call immediately. Nolan's jaw tightened, the only outward sign of his anger. She already has. Talk tomorrow. The emergency hearing lasted less than 30 minutes. Judge Pike dismissed Lacey's protective order claim with barely concealed irritation, citing the supervisor's statement contradicting Lacey's account and the suspicious timing of the allegation. Lacey sat beside Patricia Wells, her new attorney, face composed but eyes burning with humiliation. Mrs. Thorne, Judge Pike said as the hearing concluded, I'm growing concerned about the pattern emerging in this case. First, the questionable restraining order. Now, these unsubstantiated allegations. Another such incident will result in sanctions. Is that clear? Yes, Your Honor, Lacey replied, voice tight. Outside the courtroom, Roger clapped Nolan on the shoulder. Clean win. Judge Pike is clearly losing patience with Lacey's tactics. It's not over, Nolan replied, watching Lacey and Patricia Wells huddled in intense conversation across the hall. They'll try something else. Later that afternoon, Avery entered Nolan's office with her usual efficiency. Your 3 o'clock canceled, and Judge Pike's clerk called. They've moved up the next hearing to Friday. Why? Apparently, someone else has come forward with information about Marcus Hale's ethical violations. The judge wants to address it all at once. Avery hesitated. There's something else. A message from Lacey. Nolan looked up. What did she say? She called the office, asked to speak with you. When I told her you were unavailable, she said to tell you, and I quote, this isn't over. I know about Singapore. Nolan's expression didn't change, but his mind rapidly analyzed the implications. Singapore, where his company had recently secured a major contract with a technology firm. A deal not yet made public. Thank you, Avery. That will be all. Once alone, Nolan picked up his phone and called Jace. I need a favor, he said when his brother answered. Name it. Could you stop by Lacey's office? Just walk in, ask for her, see how people react. Her medical billing office? What? I have a theory I want to test. Can you do it today? 2 hours later, Jace called back. Something strange is definitely going on. When I asked for Lacey, the receptionist got nervous, said she was out. When I mentioned I was your brother, a manager came out, tried to hustle me away. I overheard someone say that's the brother called Marcus. Did you see Lacey? No. Place seemed on edge, though. Nolan thanked him and hung up, pieces falling into place. The Singapore deal, Lacey's message, the nervous office staff. Someone was feeding Lacey information about his company information she shouldn't have access to. He pulled up the visitor log for the building, scanning for familiar names. Found nothing suspicious. Next, he checked the company's secure server access log for the past month. Again, nothing unusual. Finally, he reviewed the email server logs. They're an external access attempt to his executive email account from an IP address he didn't recognize. Blocked by the system's security protocols, but concerning nonetheless that a knock at his door interrupted his investigation. Avery entered, her expression somber. Mr. Thorne, I need to tell you something. Something important. Come in. Close the door. Avery sat across from him, her usual composure faltering slightly. I was approached by Marcus Hale last week. He offered me money for information about you and the company. Nolan's expression didn't change. What kind of information? Financial records, client lists, confidential projects. Specifically, he asked about the Singapore contract. She met his gaze steadily. I told him no, of course. But I didn't tell you immediately because I wanted to find out how he knew about Singapore. That deal isn't public yet. And did you? Yes. There's a clerk in the legal department, Emma Reese. She helped prepare the Singapore contracts and has been seen having lunch with Lacey several times in the past month. Avery placed a folder on his desk. Here's the evidence timestamps showing when she accessed the Singapore files, photos of her meeting Lacey, and a record of a wire transfer to her personal account 3 days ago. Nolan opened the folder, reviewed the contents. How did you get this? I have friends in IT, and I've been watching everyone since this divorce started. I knew someone might try to use company information against you. Why didn't you come to me sooner? Avery straightened. Because I wanted absolute proof before making an accusation, and because I thought it might be useful in court. Nolan studied her for a moment. Tomorrow, at your deposition, Patricia Wells will try to discredit you. She'll suggest you're testifying against Marcus Hale out of loyalty to me, not because of what actually happened. I know. I'm prepared. Are you prepared to tell Judge Pike about Lacey attempting to steal proprietary company information? About this Emma Reese being paid to leak confidential data? Avery didn't hesitate. Yes, I have all the documentation ready. Nolan closed the folder. Tomorrow, I want you to tell the entire story. Not just about Marcus Hale's past ethical violations, but about this current corporate espionage attempt. Can you do that, Mr. Thorne? Avery said, a hint of steel in her voice. I've been waiting for the opportunity. The next day, as Avery's deposition was scheduled to begin, Nolan received an unexpected call from Roger Daniels. You need to get down here now, his attorney said, voice urgent. Something's happened with Avery's deposition. Patricia Wells is trying to block it. On what grounds? She's claiming Avery has a personal vendetta against Marcus Hale and that her testimony is prejudicial. Roger lowered his voice. But that's not the real issue. Avery just arrived, and she has bombshell evidence about Lacey trying to steal company secrets. Wells is in a panic, trying to keep it from coming out. I'm on my way. When Nolan arrived at the courthouse, he found Roger waiting outside the deposition room, looking grimly satisfied. Judge Pike overruled Wells. Avery's testimony is proceeding. And Nolan, she's magnificent. Clear, detailed, devastatingly precise. Roger nodded toward the room. They're taking a break now. You can go in. Inside, Avery sat alone at the table, reviewing her notes. She looked up as Nolan entered. Mr. Thorne, I've covered the Marcus Hale ethics violations from 7 years ago. Next, we'll address the corporate espionage attempt. How did Wells react? She tried to object, claimed it wasn't relevant to the divorce proceedings. Avery's lips curved in a slight smile. The court reporter said Judge Pike needs to see this immediately. Nolan nodded. You understand what this means? If this evidence holds up, Lacey could face criminal charges. I know. Avery met his gaze evenly. She made her choice when she decided to steal from the company, when she tried to use your life's work against you. The rain returned to Ridgewell with a vengeance, pounding against the windows of Nolan's temporary apartment as he reviewed the transcript of Avery's deposition. Her testimony had been devastating to both Marcus Hale and Lacey. Judge Pike had immediately referred the corporate espionage allegations to the district attorney's office. Emma Reese, the clerk who had leaked information, was now cooperating with investigators in exchange for leniency. And Lacey's phone records showed multiple calls to a competitor of Thorne Security Technologies in the weeks before the divorce filing. The doorbell rang, pulling Nolan from his thoughts. He checked the security camera. Jace stood on the porch, rain dripping from his jacket. Nolan opened the door. You're soaked. Nice to see you too. Jace stepped inside, shaking water from his hair. Forgot what Ridgewell rain was like. Makes Portland seem dry. What brings you here? Can't a man visit his brother without an interrogation? Jace shrugged off his wet jacket. Actually, I have something for you. Something important. Nolan led him to the kitchen, where Jace pulled a flash drive from his pocket. What's this? Nolan asked. Remember when I told you about Lacey moving money to her sister's account in Seattle? I did some more digging. Jace tapped the drive. She didn't just move money. She set up a whole shell company under her sister's name. Funneled over $500,000 from your accounts into it over the past year. Nolan's eyes narrowed slightly. How did you get this information? Let's just say I know people who are good with computers and don't ask too many questions. Jace pushed the drive across the table. It's all their bank transfers, company registration documents, emails between Lacey and her sister. Enough to prove financial fraud. Nolan picked up the drive, turning it over in his fingers. Why are you doing this, Jace? Why help me after 7 years of silence? Jace leaned back in his chair, something vulnerable crossing his face. You want the whole truth? Fine. He took a deep breath. After Dad died, after a fight, I was angry. Convinced myself you were just like him, controlling, manipulative, cold. Told myself you deserved whatever happened to you. What changed? I did. Jace met his eyes. 2 years ago, I went to therapy. Not by choice, court-ordered after a bar fight. Nolan's eyebrows rose slightly. Yeah, not my finest moment, Jace admitted. Anyway, the therapist helped me see that I wasn't just angry at Dad or you. I was angry at myself for not standing up to him when we were kids. For letting him pit us against each other. Outside, thunder rumbled, mirroring the tension in the room. When I heard through the grapevine about Lacey's plans, it felt like a chance to make something right. Not to fix everything between us. I know it's too late for that, but to at least not let someone else hurt you the way Dad did. Nolan was silent for a long moment. Thank you, he finally said, pocketing the drive. This will help the case. Jace nodded, accepting to return to practical matters. So what's the next step? Roger presents our full case at the hearing next week. With this evidence of financial fraud, we can push for criminal charges. Is that what you want? Lacey in jail. Nolan considered the question. What I want is irrelevant. Actions have consequences. Hers included attempting to steal company secrets and committing financial fraud. Always the pragmatist. Jace shook his head. Some things never change. Some things do, Nolan countered quietly. Their eyes met in a moment of silent understanding. Not forgiveness exactly, not reconciliation, but something had shifted between them, a small crack in the wall of silence and resentment built over years. Jace cleared his throat, breaking the moment. How's Nora handling all this? Better than expected. She's resilient. Nolan's voice softened slightly at the mention of his daughter. She asks about you. Me? Surprise colored Jace's voice. She found an old photo of us. From before everything. Asked who you were. What did you tell her? The truth. That you're her uncle. That we had a disagreement a long time ago. Jace nodded, something like regret crossing his face. I'd like to meet her properly sometime. If that's okay with you. We'll see. Nolan didn't elaborate, but it wasn't an outright refusal progress. Of a sort. As Jace prepared to leave an hour later, the rain still falling steadily outside. He paused at the door. Nolan, there's something else you should know. About Lacey. He hesitated. She approached me last week. Offered me money to testify against you. Nolan's face hardened. What did she want you to say? That you threatened me after Dad's funeral. That you have a history of intimidation and control. That I was afraid of you. Jace's mouth twisted. She thought because of our estrangement, I'd jump at the chance to hurt you. What did you tell her? To go to hell. Jace shrugged. Not my most eloquent moment, but got the point across. Nolan nodded once, processing this new information. Did you record the conversation? A slow smile spread across Jace's face. Little brother, you're not the only one who thinks ahead. He pulled out his phone, tapped a few times, and handed it to Nolan. Listen for yourself. Lacey's voice filled the space between them. $20,000. Cash. All you have to do is tell the judge Nolan threatened you after your father's funeral. That you've been afraid of him for years. And why would I do that? Jace's recorded voice replied. Because he screwed you over. Took everything your father left. Doesn't that make you angry? Lady, you have no idea what happened between me and my brother. But I do know one thing, Nolan might be many things, but he's not a liar or a thief. You, on the other hand, this is your chance to get back at him, Lacey pressed. Don't you want that? What I want is for you to leave Nora out of your games. Asking a 10-year-old to lie about her father? That's low even for you. The recording ended. Nolan handed the phone back, his expression unreadable. I'll send you the file, Jace said. More ammunition for your arsenal. Thank you. The day before the final hearing, Nolan received the call he'd been half expecting. Mr. Thorne, this is Principal Matthews from Ridgewell Academy. There's been an incident involving Nora and her mother. Nolan's hand tightened on the phone. What happened? Mrs. Thorne attempted to remove Nora from school during lunch period. When our staff reminded her of the court order requiring supervised visitation only, she became disruptive. Nora is safe in my office, but she's quite upset. I'll be there in 15 minutes. When Nolan arrived at the school, Nora sat in the principal's office, small and pale, her hands twisting in her lap. She looked up when he entered, relief flooding her face. Dad! He knelt beside her chair. Are you all right? She nodded, then shook her head. Mom was crying. She said we had to leave right away, that we were going on a trip. When Mrs. Phillips said she couldn't take me, Mom started yelling. Tears welled in her eyes. She said you were trying to take me away from her forever. Nolan kept his face composed, though rage burned cold within him. You're safe now. That's what matters. Principal Matthews cleared her throat. Mr. Thorne, a word? In the hallway, she lowered her voice. The school resource officer intervened when Mrs. Thorne refused to leave. She's been taken to the police station. Given the existing court orders, they're treating this as an attempted parental kidnapping. Where was the visitation supervisor? Mrs. Thorne told the front office she had emergency authorization from the court. By the time they realized that wasn't true and called the supervisor, the situation had escalated. Nolan nodded, processing. Has Nora given a statement? A basic one, yes. The police may want to speak with her again, with proper child advocacy present, of course. I want a copy of the security footage and statements from all staff involved. Of course, we've already preserved everything. Principal Matthews hesitated. Mr. Thorne, given what happened, we would understand if you wanted to keep Nora home until after tomorrow's hearing. That won't be necessary. Routine is important right now. Nolan glanced back toward the office where Nora waited. But I would appreciate extra vigilance. Absolutely. Back in the office, Nolan helped Nora gather her things. You're going to finish your school day, he told her gently. I'll pick you up at the regular time. Her eyes widened. But what about Mom? Is she in trouble? That's for the adults to worry about. Nolan straightened her uniform jacket. Your job is to focus on your classes and your friends. Dad, her voice was small. Mom said this was all your fault, that you're trying to take me away from her. Nolan chose his words carefully. Your mother and I both love you very much. Sometimes, when adults are going through difficult times, they say things they don't mean. But she seemed so scared. Nora's eyes searched his. You wouldn't really take me away from her, would you? The question hung in the air, heavy with implications Nora couldn't fully understand. I want what's best for you, Nolan finally said. That's all I've ever wanted. After escorting Nora to her classroom, Nolan went directly to the police station, where Roger Daniels was already waiting. I've spoken to the district attorney, Roger said by way of greeting. They're charging Lacey with attempted custodial interference, violation of a court order, and disorderly conduct. Bail, set at $50,000. Patricia Wells is already working on getting her released. Roger lowered his voice. Nolan, this is a game changer. Judge Pike has called an emergency conference at 4 o'clock today instead of waiting for tomorrow's hearing. Why? Between this incident, the corporate espionage evidence, and Jace's recording of Lacey trying to bribe him, Pike has seen enough. She's indicated she's prepared to make final rulings on custody and potential criminal referrals today. The emergency conference was held in Judge Pike's chambers rather than open court. Lacey sat beside Patricia Wells, eyes red-rimmed but defiant. She didn't look at Nolan as he entered with Roger. Judge Pike got straight to the point. I've reviewed the police report from today's incident at Ridgewell Academy, along with the security footage. Mrs. Thorne, your actions constitute a serious violation of this court's orders. Patricia Wells leaned forward. Your Honor, my client was overwhelmed and concerned for her daughter's welfare. She exercised poor judgment, but, Ms. Wells, save it. Judge Pike's tone was withering. Your client has demonstrated a pattern of deception and manipulation throughout these proceedings. Today's incident is merely the latest example. She turned to Lacey. Mrs. Thorne, do you understand the seriousness of your actions? Lacey straightened. Your Honor, I was afraid. The evidence Avery Duval presented the corporate espionage allegations. I knew Nolan would use it to take Nora away permanently. I panicked. So your solution was to violate a court order and attempt to flee with your daughter? Judge Pike's eyebrows rose. That doesn't inspire confidence in your judgment, Mrs. Thorne. I made a mistake. I admit that. Lacey's voice cracked. But everything I've done has been to protect myself and Nora. Nolan is controlling. Cold, just like his father was. Nolan didn't react, though the comparison stung. Mr. Thorne has presented substantial evidence contradicting those claims, Judge Pike noted, including testimony from your daughter directly refuting allegations of controlling behavior. She's just a child. She doesn't understand. Mrs. Thorne, Judge Pike's voice sharpened. Given the severity of today's incident, combined with the evidence presented in Avery Duval's deposition and the recording of your attempting to bribe Jace Thorne to testify falsely, I am prepared to make immediate rulings on custody and division of assets. Patricia Wells paled. Your Honor, we request time to present mitigating evidence and character witnesses. Request denied. I've seen more than enough. Judge Pike shuffled her papers. Here is my ruling. Mr. Thorne is granted full legal and physical custody of Nora Thorne, effective immediately. Mrs. Thorne will have supervised visitation only, pending completion of a psychological evaluation and parenting classes. Lacey gasped. You can't. I can and I have. Judge Pike continued. Regarding division of assets, the marital home will be sold, with proceeds divided equally after Mr. Thorne is reimbursed for the funds Mrs. Thorne fraudulently transferred to her sister's account. She looked directly at Lacey. Furthermore, I am referring the corporate espionage evidence to federal prosecutors for potential criminal charges. Your attempt to steal and sell proprietary information from Thorne Security Technologies appears to violate several federal statutes. Lacey seemed to crumple in her chair. Patricia Wells placed a steadying hand on her AR and as everyone rose. Lacey suddenly lunged toward Nolan, voice rising hysterically. This isn't over. You think you've won, but you haven't. I'll fight this until... Patricia Wells pulled her back, whispering urgently in her ear. Lacey subsided, but her eyes remained fixed on Nolan, burning with hatred and desperation. Outside the chambers, Roger shook Nolan's hand. Congratulations. It's essentially over. The formal hearing tomorrow will just confirm today's rulings. What about the criminal charges? That's up to federal prosecutors now, but the evidence is strong. Lacey's looking at serious legal jeopardy. Nolan nodded, processing. The victory he'd methodically worked toward for months was finally his. Nora was safe. His company was secure. Lacey would face consequences for her actions, yet he felt no triumph, no satisfaction. Only a hollow certainty that justice, cold and impersonal, had been served. The formal hearing was a subdued affair. Judge Pike read her final orders into the record, her tone as precise and uncompromising as a surgeon's scalpel. Lacey sat beside Patricia Wells, eyes downcast, occasionally dabbing at tears that seemed more performative than genuine. Nolan maintained his customary calm as the judge confirmed his full custody of Nora, the equitable division of assets, minus the funds Lacey had fraudulently transferred, and the formal referral of evidence to federal prosecutors. Furthermore, Judge Pike continued, I'm removing Marcus Hale as counsel in all pending cases in my courtroom pending investigation by the Bar Association. The evidence of ethical violations presented by Avery Duval is deeply troubling and merits thorough review. Lacey's head snapped up at this, color draining from her face. She whispered urgently to Patricia Wells, who shook her head slightly to AS if on cue. The courtroom doors opened, and Corinne Wolfe herself slipped in. Judge Pike's eyes narrowed. Ms. Wolfe, how fortunate that you could join us after all. Her tone made it clear she believed no such thing. Since you're here, you could be sworn in for questioning. Corinne froze, eyes darting between Lacey and the exit. I just came to support my friend. I'm not prepared to testify today. You submitted an affidavit to this court, Ms. Wolfe. That opens you to cross-examination. Judge Pike gestured to the witness stand. Come forward and be sworn in. What followed was 30 minutes of excruciating testimony as Roger Daniels methodically dismantled Corinne's credibility, presenting email after email showing her coaching Lacey on how to appear victimized, how to frame Nolan's actions in the worst possible light. That be why the time Roger finished, Corinne was in tears. When Judge Pike asked if she had anything to add, Corinne looked directly at Lacey. I'm sorry, Lace. I can't do this anymore. Her voice shook. Everything was your idea. The fake evidence, pressuring Nora, all of it. I just went along because you're my friend, but I never thought it would go this far. Lacey's face contorted with fury. You lying bitch. You were the one who... Mrs. Thorne. Judge Pike's gavel came down hard. One more outburst, and I'll hold you in contempt. Lacey subsided, but the damage was done. Her mask of wounded innocence had slipped, revealing the calculation beneath. Judge Pike dismissed Corinne, who practically fled the courtroom, then addressed the attorneys. In light of Ms. Wolfe's testimony, I'm even more confident in my ruling. Mr. Thorne, you're granted full custody of Nora Thorne. Mrs. Thorne, your visitation will be supervised and contingent upon completion of anger management and parenting classes. She shuffled her papers. I'm also referring transcripts of today's proceedings to the district attorney's office for review of potential perjury charges against both Mrs. Thorne and Ms. Wolfe. This court is adjourned. The court order came through with clinical efficiency. Lacey was to vacate the marital home within 48 hours, taking only personal belongings and items specifically listed in the divorce decree. Everything else would remain until the house could be appraised and sold. Nolan didn't attend the removal. Instead, he sent Avery to oversee the process. He had no desire to witness Lacey's final exit from the life they'd built. No need for that particular closure. It went as well as could be expected, Avery reported later that evening. Mrs. Thorne was emotional, but compliant. Did she take anything not on the list? She attempted to remove some artwork and jewelry that weren't specified. I reminded her of the court order. Avery hesitated. She asked about Nora. Wanted to know when she could see her. Nolan's face remained impassive. The court established the visitation schedule. First supervised visit is next Tuesday. I informed her of that. Avery placed a folder on his desk. Here's the inventory of what she removed, signed by both Mrs. Thorne and myself as witness. Thank you, Avery. Nolan opened the folder, scanning its contents. The company audit, is it complete? Yes. Emma Reese accessed 16 classified files related to the Singapore project. All have been secured, and our client has been informed of the potential breach. And Reese herself terminated this morning. The evidence has been turned over to the FBI. Avery straightened. She's cooperating fully, apparently. Claims Mrs. Thorne approached her, not the other way around. That evening, as Nora proudly displayed her solar system model to her class, Nolan sat in the back of the classroom, watching his daughter shine. She'd weathered the storm of her parents' divorce with remarkable resilience, though he knew there were deeper wounds that would take longer to heal. My dad helped me with the structure, Nora explained to her classmates, gesturing to the carefully balanced model. But I painted all the planets myself. Neptune was the hardest because getting that exact blue was tricky. Pride and emotion Nolan rarely allowed himself warmed his chest. Not just for Nora's academic achievement, but for her integrity. Despite everything, she hadn't let Lacey's influence corrupt her sense of truth. After the presentation, as they walked to the car together, Nora looked up at him. Dad? Ms. Phillips said Mom can start visiting next week. That's right. Tuesday afternoon. Will you be there too? Nolan shook his head. No. The supervisor will be there to make sure everything goes well. Nora was quiet for a moment, processing. Are you still mad at Mom? A complicated question with no simple answer. Nolan chose his words carefully. It's not about being mad, Nora. Your mother made choices that had consequences. Now we all need to adjust to a new normal. But you don't hate her, right? Because Ms. Phillips says it's bad for kids when their parents hate each other. Nolan stopped walking, knelt to Nora's level. I don't hate your mother. I'm disappointed in her choices. But she's still your mother, and you're allowed to love her. Nora's eyes, so serious and perceptive, studied his face. Mom says you never forgive anyone, that you hold grudges forever. The observation, uncomfortably accurate, caught Nolan off guard. Forgiveness is complicated, Nora. Sometimes it's earned, sometimes it's given freely. But it always requires acknowledgement of the wrong that was done. Has Mom acknowledged her wrongs? Not yet, but people can change, can learn from their mistakes. Nora nodded, seemingly satisfied with this answer. The FBI agents arrived at Thorne Security Technologies promptly at 9 a.m., credentials displayed with professional efficiency. Agent Wilson, a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s, and Agent Keller, younger but equally focused, were escorted to Nolan's office. Mr. Thorne, Agent Wilson began after introductions. We appreciate your cooperation in this investigation. We have some additional questions about the proprietary software Mrs. Thorne allegedly attempted to sell. Of course. Nolan gestured for them to sit. My technical team has prepared a complete forensic analysis of the access files. Yes, we've reviewed that. Agent Keller opened a folder. What we're particularly interested in is the nature of the Singapore project, specifically why it would be valuable to competitors. Nolan leaned forward slightly. The Singapore project involves encryption algorithms for secure transmission of biometric data. It's years ahead of anything else on the market. Facial recognition, retinal scanning, and fingerprint identification transmitted with quantum-resistant encryption. And the market value? Agent Wilson asked. Conservative estimates place it at over $300 million annually once fully implemented. Singapore's government has already committed to a nationwide rollout for their security infrastructure. The agents exchanged glances. Mr. Thorne, Agent Wilson said carefully, based on our investigation, we believe Mrs. Thorne was specifically targeting this project, not just randomly accessing company data. That doesn't surprise me, Nolan replied. It's our most valuable intellectual property. What might surprise you, Agent Keller continued, is that we've identified the competitor she was in contact with. Asiatech Security, based in Jakarta. They've been trying to secure the Singapore contract for years. Nolan's eyes narrowed slightly. Asiatech is run by Victor Zhang. He was my father's former business partner before they had a falling out 20 years ago. Yes, we're aware of that connection. Agent Wilson pulled out another document. What you may not know is that Mr. Zhang and your ex-wife have a history of their own. They met at an industry conference in Vancouver last year, a conference you were scheduled to attend, but canceled at the last minute. I had a family commitment, Nolan recalled. Nor a school play. Lacey went in my place. According to our sources, Mrs. Thorne and Mr. Zhang had multiple private meetings during that conference, and communications between them continued afterward. Agent Wilson's expression remained professional, but her implication was clear. Nolan processed this information, pieces falling into place. You're suggesting Lacey's affair with Marcus Hale wasn't her only infidelity. We're not in the business of investigating marital fidelity, Mr. Thorne, Agent Wilson replied. But we are investigating corporate espionage and potential national security implications, given Singapore's strategic importance. The timing of her divorce filing is interesting, Agent Keller added. It coincided almost exactly with the final phase of the Singapore project's development. I didn't file, Nolan corrected. Lacey did. Yes, but according to the evidence you presented in court, you had been building a case against her for months prior. What prompted that initial suspicion? Nolan considered the question. I received an anonymous envelope containing photos of Lacey with Marcus Hale. Have you ever considered who sent those photos? Or why? The implication hung in the air. Had someone deliberately tipped him off? Set events in motion that would expose Lacey's corporate espionage activities. I assumed they came from someone at the hotel, Nolan said slowly. A staff member looking for compensation, perhaps. Agent Wilson shook her head. We've traced those photos, Mr. Thorne. They were taken by a private investigator hired by Victor Zhang. Nolan's expression didn't change, but his mind raced through implications. Why would Zhang expose Lacey if they were working together? We believe their relationship soured, Agent Keller explained. Based on recovered communications, Mrs. Thorne was demanding more money than initially agreed upon for the Singapore project data. When Zhang refused, she threatened to approach a different competitor. Classic double-cross, Agent Wilson added. Zhang decided to eliminate her as a threat by exposing her affair with Hale, knowing it would lead to a divorce. What he didn't anticipate was how thoroughly you would investigate, or that the corporate espionage angle would come to light. We've already taken Mr. Zhang into custody when he arrived in Los Angeles for a conference yesterday, Agent Keller continued. And we're preparing charges against both him and Mrs. Thorne under the Economic Espionage Act. How serious are these charges? Nolan asked. Very. The Singapore project has national security implications due to its encryption capabilities. We're talking potential sentences of 15 to 20 years. Agent Wilson closed her folder. Mr. Thorne, we'll need your continued cooperation as this case proceeds. Your testimony will be crucial. The federal courthouse had none of the familiar comfort of Judge Pike's courtroom. Its cavernous ceilings and formal atmosphere emphasized the gravity of proceedings that transcended divorce and custody into matters of national security. Nolan sat in an anteroom, waiting to provide his deposition about the Singapore project and the data Lacey had attempted to access. Across the hall, Marcus Hale was being processed following his arrest the previous day. A door opened, and Lacey appeared, escorted by federal marshals. She wore a plain navy suit, a far cry from her usual designer attire, and lacked makeup. The effect was jarring. She looked smaller, older, stripped of her carefully constructed armor. Her eyes met Nolan's across the corridor. For a moment, naked vulnerability showed in her face, fear, perhaps, or regret. Then her chin lifted, the familiar defiance returning. The marshals guided her toward another room, but as they passed, Lacey paused. Nolan, she said, voice low, I need to speak with you. Just for a minute. The marshal beside her frowned. Mrs. Thorne, you're not permitted to. Please, she interrupted, eyes still on Nolan. It's about our daughter. Nolan considered her for a moment, then nodded to the marshal. 2 minutes. In the presence of the marshals. They moved to a small conference room off the main corridor. Lacey sat across from Nolan, handcuffs jangling against the table. How is Nora? She asked immediately. Confused. Hurt. Resilient. Nolan's voice remained neutral. She asks about you. Lacey's composure wavered. I'm negotiating a plea deal. My attorneys think I can get the sentence reduced to 5 years with cooperation. Her eyes searched his. 5 years, Nolan. Nora will be 15 when I get out. Actions have consequences, he replied simply. I know that. Frustration edged her voice. I'm not asking for your forgiveness. I'm asking. She broke off, visibly gathering herself. I'm asking you not to poison Nora against me while I'm gone. Nolan's eyebrows rose slightly. Is that what you think I would do? I don't know anymore. Lacey's eyes filled with tears, real ones this time, not the calculated displays from court. I don't know who you are. I'm not sure I ever did. That's an interesting observation coming from you. She flinched at his tone, but pressed on. Nora deserves to have a mother, even a flawed one, even one who made terrible mistakes. Her voice dropped. I'm pleading guilty, Nolan. Taking responsibility. Isn't that what you always wanted? Accountability? Nolan studied her, searching for the manipulation beneath the apparent sincerity. Found none, or at least none he could definitively identify. What exactly are you asking for? Let her write to me. Visit when it's allowed. Don't turn her against me. Lacey's hands twisted together. She's all I have left. She was never a possession, Lacey. Not mine, not yours. Nolan's voice hardened slightly. But you tried to use her as one. Asked her to lie. Attempted to flee with her against court orders. I was desperate. Scared. Lacey leaned forward. I know I was wrong. About everything. The affair, the corporate espionage. Trying to take the company, all of it. I'm paying for those mistakes. She held up her cuffed hands. But don't make Nora pay too. The marshal at the door cleared his throat. Time's up. Nolan stood, buttoning his suit jacket. I will never lie to Nora about what you did, he said, voice measured. But I won't prevent her from maintaining a relationship with you. if that's what she wants. Relief flooded Lacey's face. Thank you. Don't thank me. This isn't forgiveness, Lacey. Nolan's eyes were cold. This is for Nora, not you. You burned every bridge. This is the price. He turned and walked out without looking back, leaving Lacey staring after him, the brief hope in her eyes fading to resignation 3 weeks after the federal depositions. As autumn settled over Ridgewell with rust-colored certainty, Nolan stood in the empty house that had once been his home with Lacey. The real estate agent had left moments ago, paperwork for the sale finalized. The new owners would take possession next week. Nolan walked through the silent rooms, footsteps echoing on hardwood floors. No ghosts haunted these spaces, no lingering sentiment clouded his assessment. Just a house well-built, well-maintained, and now sold for a price that satisfied the court's division of assets. His phone rang Jace. Just finished the job at your new place, his brother said without preamble. Shelving units are installed in the garage, strong enough to hold your entire tool collection and then some. Thank you, Nolan replied. I'll be back in about an hour. Take your time. I'm hanging out with Nora. She's showing me her rock collection. The casual domesticity of the statement, his estranged brother, now comfortably spending time with his daughter, still felt novel, almost jarring. Make sure she does her homework before dinner, Nolan said. Already done. Kid's smarter than both of us combined. Jace paused. You okay? Being back in the old house. It's just a building. Right. Jace's tone suggested he didn't quite believe this. See you when you get here. After hanging up, Nolan completed his final walkthrough. In the home office, he paused, remembering the evening he'd opened that anonymous envelope with its damning photographs, the catalyst for everything that followed. That if the FBI was correct, Victor Zhang had sent those photos, intending to remove Lacey as a liability. Instead, he had triggered a cascade of investigations that led to his own arrest and pending prosecution. One final room remained Lacey's walk-in closet, now emptied of her designer clothes. As Nolan did a perfunctory check of the built-in drawers, his hand brushed something in the back of the top drawer's small velvet box he didn't recognize. He removed it, opened it carefully. Inside was a pair of diamond earrings he had given Lacey for their 5th anniversary, before Nora was born, when their marriage still held promise. She'd worn them often in those early years, less frequently as time passed. He'd assumed she'd taken them when she left. Nolan stared at the forgotten jewelry, unexpected evidence that even Lacey had once valued what they shared, or perhaps just valued the diamonds themselves. Impossible to know for certain. After a moment's consideration, he pocketed the box, not for sentiment's sake, but because they were valuable and technically part of the marital assets. He would have his attorney add them to the inventory. Outside, he locked the door for the final time and placed the key in the lockbox for the real estate agent. No backward glance, no moment of reflection. Just the clean finality of a chapter concluded 6 months after the divorce was finalized. On a clear spring morning, Nolan sat in his new office at Thorne Security Technologies. The company had weathered the publicity storm surrounding Lacey's arrest and trial with minimal damage. If anything, their security protocols had gained credibility for stopping the breach before sensitive data could be extracted. The Singapore contract had proceeded as planned. Stock prices, after an initial dip, had rebounded to record highs. Industry publications had praised Nolan's steady leadership through the crisis. Victory by any objective measure. Avery knocked at his open door. Mr. Thorne, the board meeting is in 10 minutes. Thank you, Avery. Nolan gathered his tablet and notes. The quarterly reports are prepared. Yes, along with the presentation on the new Hong Kong expansion. She hesitated, and Ms. Hanson called. Nora did very well in her meeting. She said it was a breakthrough session. Ms. Hanson was Nora's therapist, recommended by the court to help her process the divorce and her mother's imprisonment. Initially resistant, Nora had gradually opened up over the past months. Good. Nolan's tone remained neutral, though something in his eyes softened. Remind me to call her back this afternoon. Later that evening, as rain began to fall against the windows of their home, Nolan sat in his new office while Nora colored at his desk, humming softly to herself as she worked. The scene was peaceful, comfortable a moment of ordinary tranquility after months of extraordinary turmoil. Dad, Nora looked up from her drawing. Are you sad about Mom? The directness of the question caught him off guard. Why do you ask? Ms. Hanson says it's okay to feel lots of different things at the same time. Like how I love Mom, but I'm also mad at her. Nora studied him with serious eyes. But you never seem sad or mad or anything. Nolan set down his tablet, giving her his full attention. I process emotions differently than some people, more privately. But you do have them? Emotions? Yes. Nolan chose his next words carefully. I was disappointed when I learned about your mother's choices. Hurt in my own way. Concerned for you, above all else. Nora nodded, absorbing this. Ms. Hanson says Mom made bad choices, but that doesn't make her a bad person all the way through. That's a mature perspective. Do you think that too? A complex question requiring a nuanced answer. Nolan considered it seriously, owing his daughter honesty rather than platitudes. I think people are more than their worst choices, he said finally. Your mother did things that were wrong, harmful to me, to her own future, potentially to you. Those actions had consequences she must face. But that doesn't erase the good things about her. Her love for you, for instance. That's real, regardless of her other choices. Nora seemed satisfied with this answer, turning back to her coloring. After a moment, she spoke again, still focused on her drawing. Uncle Jace says you're like ice on the outside, but fire on the inside. He says that's why you're so strong, because you keep the fire contained. Nolan raised an eyebrow, surprised by this poetic assessment from his pragmatic brother. Uncle Jace is quite the way with words. I think he's right, though. Nora looked up, her expression serious beyond her years. You never yell or break things or cry, but you fight really hard for what matters. Like me. Something shifted in Nolan's chest, a tightening, a warmth. Yes, like you, I'm glad you're my dad, she said simply, returning to her coloring. Nolan watched her for a moment, this child who had somehow inherited his analytical mind but none of his emotional reserve, who could navigate complex ethical questions at 10 with a clarity many adults never achieved. I'm glad too, he said quietly. Outside, rain continued to fall steadily against the windows, a soft percussion accompanying the scratch of Nora's colored pencils on paper. The storm that had torn through their lives had passed, leaving damage in its wake, certainly, but also clearing space for new growth. Not a happy ending, perhaps. Nolan Thorne didn't believe in such simplistic concepts, but a just one, a stable foundation from which to build whatever came next. Victory, after all, didn't require fanfare or dramatic declarations. Sometimes it arrived in silence, in small moments of connection, in a steady rebuilding after destruction in the stillness that follows the storm.